Hi guys, so I picked up 3 of the Ice Barrier structure deck today, so I thought I'd just first of all go through the structure deck, point out what's new and just sort of explain what the cards do so you can all see it for yourselves, and later on I'll be doing a deck profile with what I think to be the optimal build. So we'll start off with the general lane of the Ice Barrier. So this is a level 5 warrior. You can special summon it if your opponent controls a monster and you control an Ice Barrier. While it's on the field, spells and traps sent to your opponent's graveyard are banished instead. And when it's normal special summoned, you can add an Ice Barrier spell or trap from your deck to your hand. So that's really useful. It's 21, so it's a beater if you're going second. And the adding a spell is really useful, especially when you see some of the new spells that they've got. They're really good. Then there's Revealer of the Ice Barrier. This is the best card in my opinion. Your opponent can't tribute summon where you control another Ice Barrier. While it's on the field, that's nigh on irrelevant. Once per turn you can discard a card to special summon an Ice Barrier tuner from your deck, but it locks you into only summoning water monsters. And if you would discard a card for the effect of a Ice Barrier, you can banish this card from your graveyard instead. Then on to the Speaker. So this is a level 4 that just special summons itself from hand if you control an Ice Barrier, which these are both level 4. Hello Bahamut Shark. And when it's in the grave, if you control an Ice Barrier, you can banish it to special summon a level 1 tuner. A level 1 token. It's an Ice Barrier token, so you can use it for wins, which I'll get to later on. But yeah, it's just a really good extender for the deck. Then on to Hexa Spirit of the Ice Barrier. So this is a new level 1 tuner. This is probably what you're going to be summoning off of the Revealer. While you control another Ice Barrier, your opponent's monsters lose 500 attack and defense. I forgot to mention the continuous effect of this. Defense special monster your opponent control can't change their back position while you control another Ice Barrier. The continuous effects are not very relevant because you're just using them to special summon something else, but they could come up. The other effect of this is you can send a level 3 or lower Ice Barrier monster from your deck to your grave, and if you do, this level becomes the same as that sent monster until the end of the turn. So this is really good for putting things in grave, and level modulation for when you want to summon out something specific. Then we've got the Zooagent of the Ice Barrier. So this is probably the least useful out of the new monsters in my opinion. So you contribute this to special summon level 5 or higher Ice Barrier from your hand, and if it's in your graveyard, except turn it was sent, you can target a level 3 or lower water monster you control, reduce its level by 2, and if you do special summon this, but banish it when it leaves the field. So this is useful for just getting additional material when you're going for something like Trishula, which requires 2 non-tuners. Then we have the reprints of the old Ice Barrier monsters. So we've got Blizzed, which draws a card when it's destroyed by battle. You've got Cryomancer, which when you control another Ice Barrier, your level 4 or higher monsters can't attack. Prior, which is the best of the older support, in my opinion. So if you control an Ice Barrier monster, you can special summon this from your hand, but you can't special summon level 5 or higher monsters at the turn this is summoned that way. So you're almost never going to be using that. The effect you are going to use is that you can tribute it and target an Ice Barrier monster in your grave and special summon it. That's not once per turn, and because of his stat line of level 2, 1000 attack, you've got multiple ways to special summon him during a turn. So you've got the Frozen Chains, which I'll get to, which is the N-Archetype Reborn. You also have things like Morensis Coral Anemone and things like Surface. Then there's Defender, which is a level 3. Oh, I should have mentioned Cryomancer is a level 2 tuner. This is your level 3 tuner. So when you control another Ice Barrier, your opponent's monsters with attack higher than this monster's defense, which is 1600, can't attack. So it's just a very minor floodgate, but it's a level 3 tuner, so that's why it's somewhat useful. Then on to Warlock of the Ice Barrier. So while you control another Ice Barrier, this essentially becomes an anti-spell where both players have to set spell cards before they activate them, and they can't be activated until the next turn. Then you have Spellbreaker, which is once per turn you can send a Ice Barrier monster from your hand to your grave, and neither player can activate spell cards until the end of your next turn. So it locks both of these out until your next turn, but it can be useful if you're going against a spell heavy deck. Then you've got Strategist, which you can send an Ice Barrier monster from your hand to the grave to draw one. Then we've got the Dance Princess, which is if you control another Ice Barrier monster, you can reveal any number of Ice Barrier monsters in your hand and then target that number of set spells and traps your opponent controls and return them to the hand. Then we have the Daisojo, and if it's normal or flip summoned, change its defense position, and Ice Barrier monster your opponent you control can't be destroyed by spells and traps. Then we have the General Raiho, which is when your opponent monster on the field activates its effect on resolution, they have to discard a card or the effect is negated. Then we have the High Level Medium. If your opponent controls 4 or more cards than you do, you can special summon it, and your opponent can only activate 1 spell or trap per turn. Then we have the General Gantala, which is once per turn during your end phase you can special summon a Ice Barrier monster from your graveyard. The next card is General Grenard. During your main phase you can now summon 1 Ice Barrier in addition to your normal summon. And so that's it for the old support that's been reprinted for the monsters anyway. This is now generic support, and it's pretty much all water support. So we have the Gen X Undying Controller. This is a really good reprint in my opinion, because Gen X Undying has seen a lot of play in water decks, specifically things like the Atlantean Mermail and things like Plunder also played it. So that's for those that don't know, it sends a water monster for cost to the graveyard to add a Gen X controller. So it's really useful for sending things like Dragoon and Atlanteans. You can send your Plunders to grave in Plunder Patrol. Then we've got Aqua Spirit, so this can't be normal summoned or set. You can special summon it by banishing a water monster from your grave. It's a level 4 water extender, so that's just a really good reprint. Then we've got Duke Frog and Ronin Toden. So Swap Frogs had reprints recently, so I guess it makes sense for these to have them as well. So this becomes with Death Frog where it's on the field, and your opponent can't target monsters with attacks except this. And when it's sent from the field to the grave, you can add a frog monster from your deck to your grave, but it can miss taming, so it's only really when it's destroyed by like battle or something. This can't be used for synchro material. Its name becomes Death Frog while on the field, and if it's in your graveyard, you can banish frog to special summon it. Then we have the Fishborg Launcher. It's a level 1 tuner, can't be used for synchro material except for the synchro summon of a water monster. And if it's in your graveyard and all the monsters in your graveyard are water, you can special summon it but banish when it leaves the field. So that's just a nice level 1 tuner that can recur itself. Then we have the Milan Glacier. So this is used a lot in things like the Atlantean Mermails. So it's a sea serpent, so it can be searched with Dragoons. But if you have exactly 5 waters in the grave, you can special summon this, and if you do, your opponent discards 2 random cards from the hand. And the last monster we have is the Silent Angler. So if you control a water monster, you can special summon it from hand, but you can't special summon a monster from the hand for the rest of the turn. It's a level 4 water, it's an extender, it's good. Then on to the new spells for the archetype. So this is Winds over the Ice Barrier, so this is really good. It's tribute any number of Ice Barrier monsters, then you can special summon that many level 4 lower Ice Barrier monsters from your deck that have different names from each other. So that doesn't have to be different from the original one sent, just different ones that are summoned. So you can summon the same one that you send. That's really good. If you can just get enough Ice Barriers on the field, or if you use Speaker to get a token, you can then send it and get a fresh one out. That's really good. And except the turn it was sent to the grave, you can banish it to target one of your banished or in your grave Ice Barriers and add it to your hand. So it's really good for recursion as well. Then we have Freezing Chains of the Ice Barrier. This is an Archetype Reborn. You can target level 4 lower Ice Barrier and special summon it. When it's activated, it's a continuous spell, so it'll stay on the field. And if you have 3 or more Ice Barrier monsters, they are unaffected by the activated effects of your opponent's special summon monster from the extra deck. It's very specific. That part of it isn't very useful, but the Reborn is very useful because it's searchable off the wing. Now on to the reprints. We've got Magical Triangle of the Ice Barrier. So you reveal 3 Ice Barrier monsters with different names in your hand, and then you can destroy a card your opponent controls and then special summon an Ice Barrier from your hand. It's very specific, not very useful in my opinion. Then we have Medallion of the Ice Barrier. Fantastic card. Rota, not once per turn. Searchable. It's great. Then we have the Mirror of the Ice Barrier, which is more anti-synergy, so it's a quick effect. When your opponent banishes a card you control or in your hand or in your grave, you can then activate this to banish 2 from the same location that they banished. So if they banish 1 from your hand, you can banish 2 from their hand, banish 1 from your grave, banish 2 from their grave, banish 1 from your field, banish 2 from their field. So it's more anti-synergy than synergy, but they've called it Ice Barrier anyway, so they put it in the structure deck. Then we have the generic sports. We have Salvage, which adds 2 water monsters from your grave with 1500 attack or less. So this is seen playing things like Plunder because they have 1500. So that's just generic water sport that's pretty good. And we have the Surface, which is you can target a level 1 or level 3 or lower fish, sea serpent or aqua in your graveyard and special summon it. So this is really good for your Prior, which is a level 2 aqua. So that is a really good synergy with the deck, I think. So it's just a reborn for Nigh on any Ice Barrier that you want. We're off the structure deck does contain a few level 1s, but the only one I'm going to be playing is the Hexa Spirit. So I don't think this is a tremendous reprint, especially since it's had a recent Super TS print. I think that was a bit of a waste of space, if I'm honest. Now onto the traps, we've had the long-awaited reprint of a Pointer of the Red Lotus. So I think this is a good reprint, especially since it's a more controlling deck. You want to go first, you want to stun your opponent. So I think this makes more sense in the deck, and it's long overdue a reprint. Then we have the Fiendish Chain, so continuous trap, target an effect monster, it can't attack or activate its effect. It's a worse Fogblade, technically. Then we have the Ice Ban. If a non-water monster is normal special summoned where you control a water monster, change it to defense. Just terrible. Mind Drain. Pay 1000 life points. Now play can activate cards or cards monster effects in the hand. I think this is it's a good reprint. Bad for this deck because things like the Speaker, and if you want to summon the Wayne or the Prior in hand, you can't. Be negated. Heavy Storm Duster, target 2 spells or traps your opponent controls, on the field and destroy them. You can't conduct your battle phase until you activate this. I think that's a good reprint. It's a nice common. It's useful. Crackdown, I think that's a really good reprint. Continue spell, target face up monster your opponent controls. Take control of the monster. While you control that monster, it can't activate its effect or attack. I think that's just really good for a control deck, and I think having a common print's quite smart in this. Then we have Terror of Trishula. This gains additional effects based on how many Ice Barrier Synchro monsters you control. If you have 1, you can banish a card your opponent controls. If you have 2, you can also banish a card in your opponent's grave. And if you have 3, you can also banish a card in your opponent's hand. And if your opponent targets an Ice Barrier Synchro you control, you can banish this from the graveyard to negate the effect. I think they've made it unsearchable because it's not called Ice Barrier, and I just don't think it's very useful in the deck. Then on to the extra deck, so we've got the one new card, which is Trishula Zero Dragon of the Ice Barrier. When it's special summoned, you can banish 3 cards your opponent controls, and if it's destroyed by your opponent's card effect, you can special summon a Trishula Dragon of the Ice Barrier from your extra deck. Its attack becomes 3300, and you can half the attack of all monsters your opponent controls and negate their effects. So that's just really useful. Really good new card for them. Then the reprints, we'll get Jewel Lauren, which got the Ultra print for some reason. Target any number of cards you control, face up cards you control, return them to hand. This gains 500 attack for each until the end of the turn. I think that's a poor choice of Ultra, but that's me. Bryanak, discard any number of cards, target that number of cards your opponent controls and return them to the hand. It's an Ice Barrier, really good. Gungnir, discard up to 2 cards, destroy that number of cards your opponent controls. Again, it's an Ice Barrier, it's a good card. I just think Jaloran's sort of the unloved child of Ice Barriers, for good reason. And then finally we have the OG Trishula Dragon of the Ice Barrier. When it's synchro summoned, you can banish up to 1 card from each of your opponent's field, hand and grave. You don't get the banish effect if it's summoned off the Zero Dragon, because it has to be synchro summoned for the effect, but it's still a really good card for the deck. So overall, I think there's been some good reprints. I think the generic stuff, such as the Mind Drain, Heavy Storm, Duster and Crackdown, I think they're really good, and the Pointer, obviously. The surface and salvage are nice for generic water support, along with the pretty much all of the generic support that's been reprinted. I think they're all really good choices, especially for water decks. Yeah, so I can't really complain about them. As for specifically for the ice barriers themselves, I think out of the generic things, I'm going to be playing the surface because it special summons the prior, so that's just a reborn for anything you really need. I won't be playing the traps because traps. For the extenders, I think I'll play a couple of silent anglers, but I think that's probably it. Maybe the Aqua Spirit, but I doubt it. I think they're all good support, just not for this deck. I think other water decks can make better use of them. The spells, I'm definitely playing 3 of this, definitely playing 3 of this, definitely playing 3 of this. There's no reason to run any less than that of them. You could probably make an argument for 2 or 1 of that. As a searchable reborn if you need it, but I'll probably just be using the surface most of the time because it's not once per turn. This is once per turn, but that's searchable, that's not. So it's sort of, I think there'll be a balance between those two. As for extra deck monsters, I'll probably be playing original Trish and Zero Trish. I don't think I'll be playing any of the other ones. Jaloran is terrible, and Bryanak and Gungnir are both good, but I just think there's other synchros that do it better, such as like the Satellite Warrior, that you can summon during your opponent's turn using things like Hulk and the Shooting Riser Dragon. So I don't think they have a place in this deck, but I think these do. I think the banishing's relevant because you can obviously banish 3 cards they control. That's just super powerful, and if you can get it during your opponent's turn, that's really good. For the old support that's been reprinted, I think the Defender, I think that's a nice one-off as a level 3 tuner. It helps you with level modulation with the Hexa Spirit. The continuous effect isn't super useful, but I think it's the best level 3, considering it's the only tuner. Prior, I think will be either a 2 or a 3 of. I think it's really good, and you want to see it and you want to get it engraved. This is pretty much, if you have a reborn card, you'll be bringing this back. This will summon it back. This will summon it back, crawling them and bring it back. There's no reason to really go for anything other than that, because that can also bring back like your synchros. So yeah, I think that's it for that support. As for the new cards, new monster cards, I think it's going to be a case of 3 Wayne, because it adds you any spell, which means you can add the medallion, which is any monster. So I think that's really good. The Revealer is just the best card. That is the best card in the deck. It is 3 of, and I'll die on this hill. It's a 3 of. Speaker, I'm going to say the same. 3 of. It's an extender. It's great. You want to see it. Even if you just see this in Silent Angler, you're still getting the Bahamut Shark. You've got your level 4 waters, you want to see them. The Hexa Spirit is what you're going to be summoning off the Revealer. I think 2 is probably a good number. I think 3 is probably too many because you don't really want to open it. But I think having access to a second one will be useful, so I'm going to say 2. 2 feels right in my head. The Zoojian has its applications, but not all that often. I think 1 is plenty. 1 or 0 I think for that. But in my next video I will have my full built deck and I'll go through the card choices, but that's just, for anyone watching this, that's my sort of feel. These are the useful cards. I don't think I've missed anything else that would be incredibly useful. Like I said, the Silent Angler could be an Aqua Spirit. You could also argue for the Salvage, but you've got things like the Winds to add back any of your ice barriers that you need. I don't think you'll need to add back the Silent Angler if you've already got sort of a setup. And I think just having general support like Monster Reborns and Foolishies, because this is you know, you can foolish this, and or if you need the setup of something like a Waning Grave for you to summon off the prior, I think that's really good. So I hope that's been useful to some of you, and I hope you can enjoy the deck too, and I'll see you next time for the deck profile.
Shh, not a zombie channel.